An envious cousin destroyed the wedding dress of my dreams, but she didn't know what awaited her at the reception. When everyone saw the video of the sabotage, tears flowed and truths came to light. The revenge plan turned into something no one expected, forever changing the fate of the two women. A story of betrayal, forgiveness, and poetic justice that will stir your emotions. Like, subscribe, and comment. What would you do in her place? The red wine bled down the white fabric like blood on snow. My wedding dress, 6 months of meticulous work, every pearl hand-sewn, every inch of lace chosen with devotion, was now transforming into a stained rag before my eyes. And there stood Cecilia, my cousin, with that look of fake horror and an empty glass in her hand. It was an accident, I swear. I tripped on the rug. She could have at least rehearsed a more creative excuse after 35 years of practicing the art of family sabotage. I didn't shed a tear. Not there, not in front of her, not at that moment. At this point in my life, I've learned that crying in front of predators only excites them. Instead, I took a deep breath, smiled with all the falseness I could muster, and said, "No problem. Accidents happen." The triumphant glint in her eyes, quick as lightning, confirmed what I already knew. Those perfectly manicured hands had just executed another perfectly orchestrated strike. My wedding was in 3 days. The dress I had dreamed of since I was a little girl was ruined, and my dear cousin had finally achieved what she'd been trying to do since we were kids: steal my moment to shine. Moments later, in the restroom of that elegant restaurant where we were celebrating the rehearsal dinner, I faced my reflection in the mirror while trying, uselessly, to salvage what was left of the dress. The tears finally came, silent and hot, as I dabbed a damp napkin over the stains spreading like purple veins across the bodice. It was hopeless. The fabric absorbed the wine as if thirsty for that destruction. The restroom door opened, and through the mirror, I saw my Aunt Regina, Cecilia's mother, enter with that expression of feigned concern her daughter had inherited perfectly. "Oh, honey, what a disaster. But maybe it's a sign." She let the sentence hang in the air, but I knew the ending. A sign that this wedding shouldn't happen. A sign that I, at 35, didn't deserve the happiness that had always been denied me. A sign that, as always, I should give up my dreams so as not to overshadow her precious daughter. "A sign, Auntie?" I replied with a calm I didn't feel. "Yes, maybe it is a sign. A sign that I should have followed my gut and not asked Cecilia to be my maid of honor." Regina paled. In our family, appearances are everything. Suggesting her daughter wouldn't feature in the official wedding photos was a blow to her carefully constructed status among our relatives. "You wouldn't do that to your cousin who loves you so much." "I really do love her," Cecilia's shrill voice chimed in from behind her mother. She strode into the restroom with the walk of someone who's never had a real problem in her life. "It was just an accident, Elena. You're not going to let a little dress ruin our relationship, are you? I can lend you one of my party dresses. I have that navy blue one that will hide those few extra pounds you've gained from wedding stress." Took another deep breath. That comment about my weight was as typical of Cecilia as the accident with the wine. Since we were little, while I battled shyness and insecurity, she was the pretty cousin, Grandma's favorite, the one everyone said had presence. While I studied late to get a college scholarship, she won local beauty pageants. While I worked 2 jobs to support myself in the city, she received an apartment as a gift from her parents. And now, after years of building my career, finally finding a man who valued me for who I am, and planning the wedding I'd always dreamed of, she couldn't stand to see me happy. The ruined dress was just the latest act in a long history of subtle sabotage. "Thanks for the offer, Cecilia," I replied with a smile as artificial as her nails, "but I think I'll need something more appropriate for a bride." I turned back to the mirror, signaling the conversation was over. "Now, if you don't mind, I need a moment alone." When the door closed behind them, I allowed a few more tears to escape. They weren't just tears for the dress. They were for all the times I swallowed the pain to keep the family peace, for all the overshadowed birthday parties, for all the stolen moments, for all the little cruelties disguised as jokes, for all the times I heard my grandmother say, "Be like your cousin Cecilia, as if my existence were an inferior version, a shoddy copy of the perfect original. I remembered the day I announced my engagement during Sunday dinner at Grandma's house. Everyone seemed genuinely happy for me, until Cecilia announced, tears in her eyes, that she had also gotten engaged the week before and planned to get married in the exact same month as me. We always dreamed of being brides together. Remember, Elena? She lied shamelessly, knowing our superstitious grandmother would never allow two family weddings in the same month. It splits the blessings, she'd say. And of course, when pressed to choose, everyone expected me, as always, to give in. You've always been the more understanding one, Elena, my aunt insisted, and Cecilia has already booked the venue. That was the first time I refused to yield. I kept my date, faced Grandma's displeasure, and started a small revolution within myself. It wasn't easy. Cecilia managed to book the venue I wanted. She hired the same seamstress who had promised me exclusivity. She chose a decor theme suspiciously, similar to what I had mentioned during a family lunch. Each obstacle forced me to be more creative, more determined. And now, 3 days before the big day, she had landed her final blow. The destroyed dress was more than a ruined piece of fabric. It was a statement. You don't deserve to be happy. I wiped away the tears forcefully, almost angrily. Not this time. I wouldn't let her win again. I took my phone out of my purse and started making calls. The first was to Mariana, my best friend, and a costume designer for a theater company in the city. The second to Antonio, the designer who had created my dress, and who, thankfully, still had my patterns and measurements. The third, to Richard, my future husband, the only man who had ever seen me exactly as I am, with all my insecurities and emotional scars, and still chose to stand by my side. I didn't tell Richard about the accident. Some call it omission. I call it self-preservation. He loved the Sunday dinners at Grandma's, appreciated what he called the family warmth he never had in his own distant family. I didn't want him to see the cracks in this carefully maintained facade, at least not before the wedding. Afterward, we would have time to redefine family boundaries. I touched up my makeup, fixed my hair, and returned to the restaurant's dining room with a smile that said, "Everything is under control." Cecilia watched me like a vulture, waiting for signs of defeat. My aunt whispered to the other women in the family, probably already spreading the word that I'd had a breakdown in the restroom. My grandmother, sitting at the head of the table like the matriarch she was, seemed torn between genuine concern and fear that I might do something rash, like postponing the wedding and confirming the superstitions about the date she had tried so hard to convince me to change. "Is everything okay, honey?" Richard asked when I sat down beside him. His brown eyes, always so attentive, noticed something in my expression the others missed. "It is now," I replied, squeezing his hand under the table. "Just a little hiccup with the dress, nothing that can't be fixed." "Hiccup?" Cecilia interrupted, her voice loud enough to draw everyone's attention. "Elena, your dress is ruined. You should be honest with Richard about the situation." All heads turned towards us. This was the moment she'd been waiting for. The public humiliation. The bride in despair. The wedding possibly postponed. Or better yet, canceled. I could almost see the malicious pleasure on her perfectly made-up face. "It's true," I admitted, keeping my voice calm and controlled. "There was an accident with the dress, but I'm already handling the situation. In fact," I paused deliberately. "Maybe it was a blessing in disguise. I always thought that style was a bit too traditional. Now I have the chance to wear something truly special." Cecilia's smile froze. This wasn't the script she had planned. I was supposed to be crying, begging for help, postponing the wedding. Instead, I seemed to be thanking her for the sabotage. "But the dress was perfect," she insisted, her voice now betraying a hint of frustration. "You always said it was your dream dress." "Dreams change, cousin," I replied with a serene smile that cost me all my self-control. "People evolve. At least, some of us do." The silence that followed was almost palpable. Everyone at the table felt the veiled jab in that seemingly innocent sentence. Richard squeezed my hand under the table, a silent gesture of support. Although he didn't fully understand the battle being waged there. Grandma cleared her throat from the other end of the table. "Well, if you need help with the new dress, we're all here for you, aren't we, girls?" She looked pointedly at Cecilia and my aunt. "Of course, Grandma," Cecilia replied, quickly recovering her loving cousin mask. "Actually, I was just telling Elena I can lend her one of my dresses. I have that navy blue one that would look divine on her." "That's very kind of you, Cecilia," I replied with a sweet smile. "But I think I'll need something white. You know, tradition. Although I understand you're eager to see me wear blue, it matches sadness, doesn't it? And that would certainly make your day." Another silence. This time I saw Richard look at me with a raised eyebrow. He had never seen me show my claws like this. To him, I had always been the peacemaker, the understanding one, the one who let everything go for the sake of family harmony. In that moment, he glimpsed a different Elena, one who was tired of being walked all over. The rest of the dinner proceeded in a tense atmosphere, masked by small talk about the weather, politics, and the latest gossip from the small coastal town where we grew up. When we finally said our goodbyes, my grandmother pulled me aside. "What happened with the dress, Elena?" The truth. Her sharp eyes, undimmed by her 88 years, examined me precisely. For a moment, I considered lying, protecting Cecilia as I had done so many times before. Cecilia spilled red wine on it, on purpose. Grandma sighed deeply. She didn't seem surprised, just disappointed, perhaps with herself for not having seen what was happening right under her nose all these years. "Are you sure? Absolutely? I have the video, Grandma." I showed her the message I had received from Louisa, one of the guests, who captured the exact moment Cecilia, thinking no one was looking, deliberately tilted her glass over the dress I had carefully left hanging on the back of my chair while I went to the restroom. Grandma watched in silence, her lips pressed into a thin line. When the video ended, she simply said, "I see. You always preferred her," I continued, releasing words that had been stuck in my throat for decades. It was always, "Look how graceful Cecilia is. Look how sociable Cecilia is." While you worked quietly, building your life brick by brick, without fanfare, she completed, surprising me. "Do you think I didn't notice? Do you think I'm not proud of the woman you've become?" Cecilia was always fragile. She needed more attention, more praise. "You seemed so strong, so independent. Maybe we made the mistake of thinking you didn't need our support." Her words, though touching, came decades late. How many nights had I cried alone in my room, wishing to be noticed, to be valued for who I was, not constantly compared to my perfect cousin. "What are you going to do now?" Grandma asked. "About the dress? Or about Cecilia?" "Both, I suppose." I thought for a moment. The old Elena would have swallowed her anger, found a new dress quietly, and kept up appearances during the wedding. Maybe she would have even invited Cecilia to be maid of honor, as originally planned, to avoid causing drama in the family, but that Elena had died along with the wine-stained dress. "The dress, I'll handle it. I'm already arranging for a new one, better than the last. As for Cecilia," I paused, "she will no longer be my maid of honor. In fact, I'm reconsidering whether she should even be at the wedding." Grandma nodded slowly. To my surprise, she didn't try to dissuade me. "You know what they say about wedding invitations? They aren't legal documents, they can be revoked at any time." She smiled with a mischievousness I had never seen before. Maybe it's time Cecilia understood that actions have consequences. Went home that night with a strange feeling in my chest, somewhere between liberation and fear. The path I was taking was unknown to me. I had always been the peacemaker, the one who let things go, the one who forgave. This new territory of setting clear boundaries and defending my space was simultaneously terrifying and invigorating. Richard noticed my restlessness in the car. "There's something you're not telling me about the dress, isn't there?" I considered. Lying again. It would be easier. More. Elena. But if we were about to start a life together, maybe it was time to show him all my sides, including the one I had just discovered. "Cecilia destroyed my dress on purpose," I confessed. "I even have a video proving it." He kept his eyes on the road, but I saw his hands tighten on the steering wheel. "Why? Why would she do that?" "Because she always has," I replied simply. Since we were kids, anything good that happened to me, she had to ruin. Any achievement of mine, she had to overshadow. Only this time I have proof, and this time, I'm not going to pretend everything is okay. Richard was silent for a few moments. What are you going to do? First, get a new dress. I've already contacted some people. Then I'm going to do something I should have done a long time ago. Put Cecilia in her place. He glanced at me quickly before returning his attention to the road. I didn't know you had this side, Elena. Neither did I confessed. I think the dress wasn't the only thing Cecilia ruined tonight. She also destroyed the image of the nice cousin who always put up with everything quietly. He smiled. I like this new Elena. Really? You don't think I'm being too vengeful? I think you're finally standing up for yourself. And, as your future husband, it's my job to support you, so what's the plan? Over the next 2 days, I worked with a determination I had never felt before. Antonio, the designer, mobilized his team to create a new dress in record time. Something even more stunning than the original, Mariana brought accessories from the theater company's collection, including an antique veil with delicate silver thread embroidery that perfectly matched the new design. Richard used his connections to ensure the salon could accommodate us earlier, on the wedding day, giving us extra time for last-minute adjustments. As for Cecilia, I remained silent. I didn't answer her messages asking if I needed help with the dress. I didn't react when my aunt called, hinting that maybe it would be better to postpone the wedding until everything calmed down. I offered no explanation when Grandma informed me that Cecilia was very hurt that I hadn't responded to her offers of help. Instead, I focused on every detail of my big day. I reviewed the guest list, made small adjustments to the reception menu, and, most importantly, prepared a special surprise for my dear cousin. On the morning of the wedding, I woke up with a tranquility that starkly contrasted with the emotional storm of the previous days. Cecilia's sabotage attempts, instead of defeating me, had awakened something dormant within me, a strength I didn't even know I possessed. My prep team arrived early. Hairstylist, makeup artist, Mariana with the new dress, and 2 college friends who would be my bridesmaids. Notably absent were Cecilia and my aunt, who were supposed to be coordinating the final details according to the original plan. Cecilia called, Mariana informed me while adjusting the dress. She wanted to know where we'd be getting ready. I didn't tell her, like you asked. Perfect, I replied. I didn't doubt Cecilia would attempt one last act of sabotage if given the chance. The new dress was breathtaking. A mermaid style with French lace and tiny crystals that caught the light with every movement. More elegant and sophisticated than the original. It seemed like it was made for me from the start. When I finally looked at myself in the mirror, completely ready, I almost mentally thanked Cecilia. Without her malice, I never would have discovered this dress, nor this version of myself. You look stunning, Grandma said when she arrived to pick me up. Her eyes were misty. I've never seen a more beautiful bride. Not even Cecilia at her wedding? I teased gently. Grandma smiled. Cecilia never got married, dear. That mysterious engagement ended as quickly as it began. I don't think it even existed, to be honest. This information shouldn't have surprised me, but it did. So many altered wedding plans. So many fights over venues and vendors, all to compete, with a wedding that would never happen. Cecilia's obsession with me ran even deeper than I imagined. We arrived at the small seaside chapel exactly on time. The sky was a perfect blue, waves broke gently against the rocks, and a light breeze carried the scent of the flowers decorating the path to the altar. Everything was exactly as I had dreamed. At the back of the chapel, while waiting for my cue to enter, I saw Cecilia for the first time that day. She wore a pale pink dress, almost white, of course, and looked genuinely shocked to see me. Elena, you got a new dress. Her disappointment was almost palpable. Surprising, isn't it? I smiled, turning slightly to show off the gown in all its splendor. Almost as if someone anticipated I might need a plan B. She forced a smile. It's beautiful. Different from what you usually wear, but bold. People change, Cecilia. Some evolve. I looked her directly in the eyes. Others remain stuck in the same destructive childhood patterns. Her smile faltered. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I think you do." I kept my voice calm, almost gentle. "And I think it's time to grow up. Both of us." Before she could respond, the music started, my cue to enter. "Enjoy the ceremony," I said, moving away. From the last row, her face turned pale. "Last row? But I'm your cousin. Your maid of honor." "You were," I corrected softly, "until you spilled wine on my wedding dress. Actions have consequences, cousin." The ceremony was perfect. Simple, emotional, exactly as we had planned. Richard waited at the altar with that look of admiration that made my heart race even after 3 years together. Our vows, written by us, drew tears from practically everyone present. The moment we were declared husband and wife, under the azure sky of that perfect afternoon, was the fulfillment of a dream I had carried with me my entire life. During the reception, I kept my distance from Cecilia, not out of fear or resentment, but because there were more important things to celebrate. This was my day, mine and Richard's, and every minute was too precious to waste on old hurts. It was near the end of the party, during the toasts, that I implemented the final part of my plan. The DJ announced, "And now, a special surprise from the bride for all our guests." The lights dimmed, and a large screen lit up. A video began to play, a montage of moments from my life: childhood, adolescence, college, early days with Richard. Among these personal scenes, I included photos with various important people on my journey: family, friends, mentors. Cecilia appeared in some of these family photos, always smiling, always seemingly happy for me. Then, the video shifted to a message. To my family, who taught me so much about love, forgiveness, and personal growth. After this message, I included the clip Louisa had sent me: Cecilia deliberately pouring wine on my wedding dress, followed by her look of satisfaction. After the accident, a collective gasp went through the room. My aunt covered her mouth with her hand. Grandma shook her head sadly. Richard squeezed my hand, silently asking if I was sure about what I was doing. Then, to everyone's surprise, especially Cecilia's, who looked ready to bolt for the nearest exit, the video continued with another message. Forgiveness doesn't mean allowing others to continue hurting us. It means freeing ourselves from the weight of resentment, so we can move forward lighter. The screen then showed the moment, just hours before, when I entered the chapel in my new dress, more stunning than the original. The contrast between the ruined dress and my radiant appearance at the ceremony was palpable. A final message appeared. Sometimes, something needs to be destroyed for us to discover our true strength. Thank you, Cecilia, for helping me find mine. The lights came back on. All eyes turned to Cecilia, huddled in her seat at the farthest table in the room. Her face alternated between pale and flushed, unable to process what had just happened. She hadn't been exposed and humiliated as she probably expected. She had been publicly forgiven, which, for someone like her, was infinitely worse. I stood up and walked over to her. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. "Why?" I asked, when I reached her table. I wasn't angry, I wasn't triumphant. I was genuinely curious. Cecilia couldn't look at me. "You always had everything," she whispered. "You were always the smart one, the responsible one, the one everyone really respected. I was just pretty, just decoration. And now you'll have a perfect marriage, a perfect career, probably perfect children." "Nothing is perfect, Cecilia," I replied softly. "Least of all me. I spent my whole life feeling inadequate compared to you. You had the beauty, the charisma, Grandma's unconditional love." She looked up at me, surprised. "Grandma loves you more. Always has." I realized then how much our perceptions were distorted by the filter of insecurity. While I envied the attention she received, she envied the respect I earned. While I wished for her beauty and social ease, she coveted my determination and independence. "I think we were both wrong about a lot of things," I concluded. I extended my hand to her, not in easy reconciliation, as some wounds were too deep to heal instantly, but as a first step towards a new kind of relationship, one based not on competition and sabotage, but on respect for each other's boundaries. After a moment's hesitation, she took my hand and stood up. We didn't hug, didn't pretend everything was instantly resolved, but in that small gesture, there was a mutual acknowledgement. The lifelong war had finally ended. I returned to the head table, where Richard was waiting for me. "I'm proud of you," he whispered, as I sat down beside him. Many would have chosen revenge. Revenge would have been easier, I admitted, but it also would have been just another turn in this endless cycle. Someone had to be brave enough to break it. The rest of the party proceeded in a surprisingly light atmosphere. The public revelation and subsequent moment of truth between Cecilia and me seemed to clear the air not just for us, but for the entire family. Grandma looked 20 years younger, dancing like she hadn't since Grandpa passed away. My Aunt Regina, after an initial moment of shame, spent the evening chatting animatedly with aunts and cousins she had barely spoken to in years due to old family feuds. It was as if we had all been freed from invisible shackles we didn't even know we carried. When Richard and I left for our honeymoon, to the sound of applause and under a shower of rose petals, I looked back one last time. Cecilia stood slightly apart from the group, watching our departure with an expression I couldn't quite decipher, a mix of melancholy, regret, and perhaps a flicker of hope. In that moment, I understood that neither she nor I were absolute villains or victims in this story. We were just two women who, since childhood, had been inadvertently pitted against each other by a dysfunctional family dynamic that predated even our birth. What we did with that understanding from now on would be our choice, and for the first time, I felt that both of us were finally free to choose a different path. 3 months later, I received a box in the mail with no return address. Inside, carefully folded and protected by tissue paper, was my original wedding dress. The wine stains had been treated by a specialist, and although a faint pinkish hue was still noticeable in some areas, the overall effect was surprisingly beautiful, almost like a deliberate pattern that added character to the once immaculate fabric. Along with the dress was a handwritten card. "Some stains never completely fade, but that doesn't mean we can't create something beautiful from them. See." I smiled, feeling a mix of emotions I couldn't quite name. It wasn't forgiveness, not full reconciliation, not a magical erasing of decades of pain. It was something more complex and, in a way, more valuable. An honest acknowledgement of the past and a genuine attempt to build something different for the future. I stored the restored dress alongside the new one I had worn at the wedding. 2 dresses, 2 Elenas, the one I was and the one I became. Both were important parts of my story. The phone rang. It was Richard, calling from work to confirm our dinner plans. "Don't forget it's Grandma's birthday tonight," he reminded me. "I haven't forgotten," I replied, looking at the box still open on the bed. "Actually, I think I have the perfect gift for her." That evening, I gave Grandma an album I had put together with old family photos, including many of Cecilia and me at various moments over the years. The last page held a recent photo of us at my wedding, not smiling artificially or embracing in false camaraderie, but simply side by side, looking at each other with a kind of cautious respect that perfectly symbolized where we were now. Grandma slowly flipped through the album, her wrinkled fingers tracing each face, each moment frozen in time. When she reached the last photo, she looked at me with misty eyes. "You know," she said, her voice trembling with age and emotion, "I spent my life trying to keep this family together, often in the wrong ways. Forcing superficial reconciliations, ignoring real problems, upholding traditions that perhaps should have been questioned." She paused, looking at the photo again. "You were braver in one day than I have been in my entire life, Elena." I sat beside her on the old sofa that had occupied the center of the living room for as long as I could remember. The same sofa where, as a girl, I heard countless stories about our ancestors, where I learned to value family ties above all else, even when they felt suffocating. "It wasn't bravery, Grandma," I replied, taking her wrinkled hand in mine. "It was survival. There comes a point when continuing as before is simply no longer an option." She nodded, understanding perfectly. "Your mother would be proud of the woman you've become." The mention of my mother, who had passed away when I was just 12, stirred something in me I hadn't expected. It was after her death that the dynamic with Cecilia worsened significantly. As if, without my mother to defend me, I had become an easier, more vulnerable target. "She'd be proud of you too, Grandma," I replied, feeling it was true. "For being here, for continuing to be the force that keeps us all connected, even when it's hard." That night, as we drove home, Richard drove in silence, respecting my contemplative state. Finally, he asked, "Thinking about your mom?" "Yes," I admitted, "and about how things might have been different if she were here, and also about how maybe I needed to go through all of this to become who I am today." He took my hand, keeping his eyes on the road. "You know what I admire most about you? Your ability to turn pain into growth. Many get stuck in suffering, but you use it as fuel." I looked out the window, watching the city lights blur past, streaks of color in the darkness. I didn't have much choice. Either grow through the pain or be consumed by it. "We always have a choice," he replied softly, "and yours makes me love you even more." I smiled, feeling a wave of gratitude for having this man by my side. Someone who saw my strength, even when I doubted it myself. Someone who understood that my scars were essential parts of who I am, not imperfections to be hidden. When we arrived home, we found another surprise in the mailbox. An invitation. Cecilia was hosting a dinner party at her house at the end of the month and wanted us, Richard and me, to come. On the back of the invitation, she had handwritten, "It's not a trap, I promise. Just an attempt at a fresh start." I showed the invitation to Richard, who raised his eyebrows in surprise. "Are you going to accept?" I thought for a moment, weighing all the years of hurt against the possibility, however faint, of a different relationship with my cousin. "I am," I finally decided. Not for her, not even for me, but for what we represent together. The possibility of breaking destructive patterns that cross generations. "Are you sure?" He looked concerned. "I don't want to see you get hurt again." I smiled, feeling a certainty. That was new to me. I won't get hurt. Not because I trust her, but because now I trust myself. I know who I am. I know what I deserve. And I know how to set boundaries when necessary. That night, I dreamed of my mother. We were sitting by the sea, on the same stretch of beach where Richard and I exchanged our vows. She didn't say anything, just smiled with that smile I kept in my memory like a precious treasure. In the dream, I didn't speak either, but I felt a peace I rarely experienced when I thought of her. I woke up with tears on my face, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of recognition, of acceptance, of a kind of understanding that goes beyond words. My mother had left too soon, leaving me vulnerable in a complicated family environment. But perhaps somehow, that vulnerability forced me to develop an inner strength that might otherwise have remained dormant. The wine stains on my original wedding dress, like the emotional scars from my childhood and youth, would never completely disappear. But as Cecilia had written on the card, that didn't mean we couldn't create something beautiful from them. Something new, something unexpected, something genuinely ours. The road ahead would still be complicated. There would be moments of backsliding, moments of doubt, moments when old patterns would try to reassert themselves. But for the first time, I felt truly prepared for this journey, not as the insecure girl I used to be, nor as the vengeful bride I almost became, but as the woman who finally found her own voice, set her own boundaries, and consciously chose her own path. And maybe, just maybe, Cecilia was on a similar journey. Time would tell. In the meantime, I would continue to live my life, not in reaction to her or the shadow of our past dynamics, but on my own terms, according to my own dreams, my own hard-won truth. The stained dress, now transformed into something new and unexpectedly beautiful, would be a constant reminder. Sometimes, it's our deepest wounds that, when finally faced with honesty and courage, open us up to our greatest moments of growth and transformation.